Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me at CDCon. Today, I'm going to share with you my perspective on how to speed up approvals and risk assessment in your CI/CD process. I'll start this talk with describing customer problems that we see, then present a solution called Autopilot, and end by sharing customer stories. Let me introduce myself. I am Gopal Dommety, CEO of OpsMx. We started OpsMx 3 years ago with a simple vision to deliver software without human intervention and to make every engineer's life happy. I think in this conference, we all share this common vision. Today, OpsMx is a dedicated team of 95 people. We offer two products. The first is OpsMx Enterprise for Spinnaker. This is an enterprise-ready Spinnaker distribution. We also support open source Spinnaker. Second product is Autopilot, a continuous verification platform. We are grateful to have some of the largest global enterprises use our products at scale. Now, I was talking to a CIO of a large enterprise, and this is what he told me. He told me we implemented a modern CI and CD, and still our process of application delivery is slow and costly. He leads tens of thousands of engineers with thousands of applications and about 400,000 deployments a year. So why is their delivery so slow? If you look at their delivery pipeline, they have dev, QA, prod approvals. Their approvals take anywhere from 3 to 12 hours per release. And before the final approval, in every stage, risk assessment takes 2 to 3 hours for them. For example, in deployment, risk assessment is about determining if the canary, blue-green, or rolling update is going fine. Test assessment is about looking at the test results and determining if this can go to the next stage. If approvals or risk assessment is not done right, the cost of production failures is about $35,000 per minute for this customer. And their cost of compliance violations is very high too. Let's look at why the risk assessment time takes so much time. Risk assessment is hard for 3 reasons. First, risk assessment is very stage specific. That means that risk assessment that you do for deployment stage is different than for test stage. And also risk assessment is very app specific. So during deployment, you're looking at logs, metrics, events from either your canary, blue-green, or deployment strategies to assess whether the deployment is good to go to large-scale production. In production, you're trying to figure out if there's a problem because of which you need to roll back. In the test stage, you're trying to figure out if one of my 1,000 tests failed, can I push forward or not? The second reason is that these processes are mostly manual, and a lot of contextual domain knowledge is needed. For example, for this specific application, a specific log error is critical, whereas another type of log error is not, and that somebody needs to know. And the third reason is that the data that is required to make these assessments is not all in one place. For example, if you're looking at test stage, you have the test darkness data, you have the logs from the application itself, that is, they're all in 2 different places and they not all need to get correlated. Now, if you look at why approvals are time consuming, once the risk assessment is done, we need to roll up the risk assessment data to do the approval as shown below, like from test data or canary data, etc. Then we also need to add the DevSecOps issues from SAST and DAST, policy checks, app version dependencies, etc. All of these data is typically not in one place. It's in silos, and the approver typically lacks the visibility, overall visibility, to make quick approval decisions. The second reason is they lack the fine-grained policy controls to be able to scale to thousands of applications, thousands, tens of thousands of users, or hundreds of thousands of deployments. The third reason is that approval process needs to be flexible and typically is very complex with multiple stakeholders. The solution is what we call Autopilot. It is a machine learning system that sits on all of the data, including the data that comes out of the individual stages. It aggregates all this information and then applies machine learning to this data for the various risk assessment in the various stages. Once the risk assessments in the various stages happens, which then it applies fine-grained policy checks across these stages, and then either presents the overall visibility in one place for the individuals to make decisions, approvals, etc., or even automate the decisions when that decision is very clear. Autopilot currently works with several CI/CD platforms, including Spinnaker, Jenkins, Tekton, ArgoCD, etc. Let me go through how Autopilot is used in 3 customer case studies. In this deployment assessment case study, the customer had 3 problems. It was taking them about 3.6 hours to look into logs and metrics of deployment across multiple services whenever they were doing deployment. They had too many on-call engineering resources involved in the release process. When releasing fast, they had error-prone releases. In this case, Autopilot is being used in staging environment to observe every dependent service during deployment and analyze logs, metrics, and events. They use Jenkins for the CI/CD and Datadog and Elasticsearch for their data sources. With Autopilot, they're able to reduce the verification from 3.6 man hours to 5 minutes, and also reduce deployment failures by 70%. Next, I'm going to cover a production assessment case study. In this case study, bad deployments take place. When a bad deployment takes place, it takes about an hour for the dependent service to get impacted. This is a very large data center deployment. And in this case, the rollback was being triggered after the SLAs were sufficiently degraded because they were using production monitoring tools for their SLA and degradation identification. Now, Autopilot is deployed and is used to monitor services after deployment continuously, not just services, but also all the dependent services. In this case, Autopilot is able to trigger rollback 30 minutes sooner, thereby saving about $1 million per incident. Let me describe how a large insurance company is using Autopilot to speed up approvals. For this customer, the challenge was that approval was taking multiple days and sometimes weeks. The reason is that it's a complex environment with multiple groups, lots of application dependencies, and different tools. So Autopilot today enables them to approve in hours, as it provides overall visibility and also automates through fine-grained policy. Now, let me summarize. In most companies, approvals and risk assessment is taking much longer than it should and more expensive than it needs to be. This is really slowing down releases. Autopilot can enhance your continuous delivery by speeding up approvals and risk assessments. You can find more information about Autopilot at OpsMx.com. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.